Welcome back to the Gun Dungeon, guys. We're going to be doing a reloading and rambling today. Since I don't have my reloading equipment here to stick to the theme, I just made a reload. So it's still technically a reloading and rambling. But y'all know I like to fiddle while I talk, so I'm going to be putting just honing the edge up, not really putting an edge back on this old Benchmade Freak here, but it does need a little attention. So I'll be doing that as we speak. So with the SHOT Show that came up, and the 7mm, was it the backcountry? I think it was. I had a little video on that, and I've seen a lot of talk about it, especially on the forums. It's getting some attention on the forums, and it kind of just got me thinking about, I like the concept of that round. And I think I may have talked about that before, maybe in the SHOT Show follow-up reload rambling I did. I like the concept of that round. I just don't personally have an application for it where it's going to excel greatly over what I currently have in my stable. Like I don't need anything to take large game 600, 700 yards away. And I feel like that round was tailored for something like that with a short barrel to give you the option of, having a lighter rifle. But let's be real, it's geared towards having a short barrel so that you can run a suppressor. And I think, we're going to see a lot of that moving forward in production. And if, that concept kind of transfers over into intermediate cartridges, that's probably where I'll get on board, because that something like that would be more useful to me. Not saying that it would be something I would absolutely have to have, but I would at least be able to take advantage of it a little better than, say, the 7mm backcountry. So I say all that to say this video's kind of went a long way into the intro here without talking about the actual subject, and that is how big of a rifle round do you need? And it depends on your task at hand, but let's just use whitetail deer hunting as our focus point here. It could be coyote hunting, it could be anti-personnel, it could be squirrel if you wanted. It depends on what your task is, but I think deer hunting is a pretty commonly known subject, and a lot of people do it and know what it takes to be successful at it in your area. So what you're trying to do will determine how big of a rifle round you need. Now, where I live in the foothills of the Appalachians, so I don't have a lot of long range shots. If you get a 300-yard shot where I'm at, you're hunting somebody's hay bottom, or you're shooting ridge top to ridge top. And that's just not a super common thing. Most of my areas where I hunt are going to be less than 100 yards. So to me, even my 30-06 is kind of overkill for what I do. And, if you think about what certain rounds are designed to do, if that round is designed to be a long range, like I think Nosler has a long range bonded bullet. Hornady has some long range bullets. But if that round that you buy is designed for long range and you shoot them at 75 yards, it's not going to perform as it's designed to perform, because it's not expected to be hitting at those velocities. Does that make sense? So, the bullet selection, the round selection is really dependent on what you're trying to do. And like I said, within 100 yards, I don't know that I own a rifle round that isn't capable of taking a deer. I wouldn't feel great about using a .223 even at 100 yards, but people have done it. It's legal in Kentucky to do it. But, there are other factors that go into play too. Like, for example, I don't like to be underpowered with a rifle round when I'm deer hunting, because a lot of the areas that I hunt are very thick with brush. They have a lot of valleys, hills, easily, and I've said it 100 times before, I'm not the best tracker in the world, so I need an exit wound. I need a good blood trail. So I don't particularly like to be undergunned, with something that is going to be a rapid expanding bullet where, it's going to do devastation to the inside. But, in some of the areas I'm at, if a deer runs 100 yards on you, you have a high likelihood of losing that game unless you can track it. And without a good blood trail, I can't track for crap without a good blood trail. And especially, maybe some people can, I don't know, I can't. So having a good blood trail really means a lot to me in those particular areas. Sure, if you're hunting in a cornfield that's been mowed and the deer's standing in the middle of it, you don't need an exit wound because odds are it's going to expire before it ever even gets to the edge of the field. But, it depends on where you're at. So how big of a round you need really depends on where you're at. And a lot of people say, well, you can't have too much gun. Well, you can. And if you start looking at a lot of like the 300 Win Mag loadings, larger rounds like that, say like even like a lot of the 338 stuff, the big heavy stuff meant for, Alaskan type stuff, it's going to be a big, solid, bonded bullet, something that's not going to expand a whole lot. It's a very powerful round, but it's too much gun for shooting a white-tailed deer at 100 yards because it's just going to drive a hole straight through it with very little expansion. And most of that energy that you have in that big rifle round is going out the other side and going into the hillside. So you can have too much gun. You can have too much energy, or if it's not being expelled into the game, or you can have too much energy if you have a lot of meat loss. So you shoot a shoulder shot and you've got a very high speed, rapid expanding bullet and it does exit and you take out that front shoulder, you're not going to get much out of that front shoulder. You don't get a whole lot anyways. I typically turn most of my front shoulders into grind meat, but we eat a lot of deer burgers, so I like having grind meat. You're going to have a lot of meat loss. If you were to happen to have a bad shot, hit high, take out some of the tenderloin, you're going to take out a lot more than you would if you had a 45-70 per se with a decently expanding bullet going at a moderate speed that doesn't typically have a giant exit wound. 45-70 is going to penetrate deep. It's going to drive through. It's kind of like what I was saying earlier. A lot of that energy is going to go outside, but it's slower moving. So it's not going to have as much of that hydrostatic expansion or whatever you call it, where it's just stretching the tissue, causing massive tissue damage and getting a lot of that blood damage to the meat. You're not going to get that with 45-70 like you would something moving real fast. So back to the point of how big of a rifle round should you choose? Like I said, it depends on what you're doing, but don't think for a second that you can't get something too big for what you're doing. Where I'm at 100 yards, at 100 yards for white-tailed deer, I like to stay somewhere between low end 300 blackout, and that I typically will keep even at like 75 yards for 300 blackout. So it's very, very low end. But typically I like to stay somewhere between, 300 blackout, 7.62, 3.9s, 6.5 Grendel, up to 308 with about 150 to 165 grain bullet, 168 grain bullet. That's about where I need to be. As far as caliber selection, I typically will go with a mid-weight grain bullet for that cartridge. Don't need super heavy, don't want super light, somewhere in the mid-range of that. And that does me perfectly fine, 100, 150, 200 yards even. The 308, 16-inch barrel 308, 200 yards, 150 grain, what have I been using now? Hornady interlocks, no problems whatsoever. And that's a bomb of a shot for where I live. That same bullet round barrel combination also does very well at about 50 yards, where I'm not getting massive wounds that would take out a lot of meat, not dumping a whole lot of that energy out the other side, still get good wound track, get good blood trails. So I know that round does very well for me within 50 to 200 yards, and I don't have to worry about, massive recoil either. That's something else that you have to consider when you're talking about how big of a rifle round. It doesn't do you much good to have the most powerful round on the planet if you can't hit shit with it because you're flinching, because that sucker's about to give you another black eye. So I typically, especially in my older age, I'll typically start, as I've been starting going down in what I use the most, just because it's more comfortable to shoot. I can shoot it from odd positions, like laying down. If something happens, I have to be in a weird position to make the shot. My eye just happens to be a little closer to the optic. I don't have to worry about that co-op and big scar of my eye and can't see because there's blood running into my face and all that stuff. It's not a good time. So typically I've been going to smaller cartridges, using 6.5 Grendel a lot here lately. Call me wuss if you want to, it's fine, I don't really care. Eventually you'll wisen up too, but yeah, I mean, just do some research before you walk into your first gun store. I need a 300 Blend mag to kill Bambi. Because odds are you can probably get by with something that's a little less recoil, that's a little cheaper to shoot, not going to beat you up, going to have a little lighter package that you'd be easier carrying in the woods. And to me, those things mean a whole lot more than having the macho man, I got the big gun type stuff, To me, those three things alone make me lean more towards smaller rounds for whatever it takes to complete the task. So, anyways, I want to hear your all's thoughts on this. What do you use and why? I'm sure if you're out west, you're going to be saying, oh, I love the big, powerful Magnum rounds, and I completely get it. But where I'm at, I don't need it. But anyways, let's hear what you guys use. Let's hear some comments down below. Until next time, guys, stay tuned.